today I just want to show you how I made this cute hair bow board for all of Tate's hair bows. Well, this is a very cute little box. Look what's in here. Oh my gosh. Hair ties. Tate's hair ties. And then I've started collecting new hair ties for the baby, and I can't find anything when I want it. I made a bunch of hair ties, and this system is not working for me anymore. So it's time to come up with a solution. Today, what you are going to need is a piece of cork board. You can use any size you want. This is actually just a piece of foam board. And then you're going to need some Mod Podge, some paint brushes. They can be bristled or foam. Either one is going to work, depends on what you want to do for cleanup. I am using wrapping paper today because it is extremely inexpensive, but you could also use contact paper if you wanted to, or even fabric. You will need some tape, a pair of scissors, hooks, all of your hair bows or hair ties or headbands, glue sticks and a glue gun, and then decorations of your choice. Today I've got some buttons and a feather boa. Okay, so to get started, I just laid out the foam board, and pardon the camera right here, but I had to record all of this with my iPhone because my other camera is still not working right. So what I did was I just basically covered the foam board with the wrapping paper on the first side, and I cut that to fit. This was really hard to do one-handed. Okay, next step, I am going to start using the Mod Podge, and I am going to glue the wrapping paper to the foam board. So first off, I started by using the foam brush, and that was taking forever, and my Mod Podge started drying before I even got very much of the foam board finished. So what I ended up doing was pouring a whole bunch out and then just spreading it around. Now, obviously this is going to create some wrinkles in your wrapping paper if that's what you're using, or in your contact paper, but for this project, it's really not going to matter if there is some wrinkles in it. If you were using fabric, you would have some more wiggle room, and you could get the wrinkles out if you really wanted it to be flat. Okay, I have flipped the foam board over onto the paper, and now we're looking at the back side. My next step here is I'm going to fold all of the corners over, and I'm going to tape them down. And I decided to fold them nice and neat like a package, but it really doesn't matter because you're going to cover this with another layer of wrapping paper. So fold it however you want to fold it. Okay, now I'm going to cover the back side also in paper, and I did both sides in paper because I wanted it to be a little bit more sturdy, and also I wanted to use the best side for the front side. On this side, I just cut it exactly to fit. I flipped both sides over, and I tried to get as many of the wrinkles flat as I could. And here is where I'm going to cut this paper exactly to fit right along the edges, and then I'm just going to go back through with some more Mod Podge and glue the edges to fit. You're not going to see the edges. You're going to cover them up with trim, so if they get a little jagged, it's going to be okay. So I just put glue on that seam, and then here I am just kind of folding that paper up onto the edge, and I just kept folding it until it finally just stuck, which didn't take very long at all. And now I'm going to let it sit for a couple hours and make sure it is dry before I move on to the next step. Okay, it's been several hours now. Next step is to put a layer of Mod Podge on whatever side you have chosen to be your front side. and I chose this side, so I'm going to cover the entire thing in another layer of Mod Podge. And one of the reasons behind that is because when you put the hooks in, you want it to be a little bit more sturdy and not tear the paper, and that's what this Mod Podge will allow you to do, is stick those hooks in there without tearing the paper up. So I'll fast forward through this, but you get the idea. You cover the entire thing in Mod Podge, and then you are going to let it dry. At this point in time, I just let it dry overnight because it was already about 10 o'clock, and it was time for me to go to bed. Okay, now it's the next morning, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out a frame, basically, and that's going to be where I put my outer trim. And these are my hooks, and what I'm going to do is just use this yardstick as my frame. So I'm going to draw that a line all the way along each edge, and that is going to guide me for where I'm going to put my, basically my trim, or you know, whatever you want to use to really jazz it up. So my hooks will be placed on the inside of these lines. So now I'm just going to kind of lay out some of my some of Tate's headbands, just so I can kind of see where I want them placed. She has a massive amount of headbands, and so I want to try and maximize the space as much as I can. So now I'm just going to kind of put some hooks along here and try and get them as even as I can. Now, if you really want to get particular, then go ahead and start measuring everything here, but I am not really that picky with this project. It was extremely hot and I was ready to be done. So I basically just eyeballed it, put my dots where I wanted my first row, and then I moved down about 4 inches and I put a second row. This is going to create a whole bunch of rows for me, but they are going to be kind of tight. But again, it's a headband rack and it looks okay in the end. So I was totally happy with it. And I staggered the hooks. So the first row would be every like 4.5 inches or so across, and then I would stagger the next layer. Then all I did was poked my hooks through each of the dots that I created. And since it's foam board, you can easily poke those hooks right through there. Now the hooks are going to come through on the back side, so if you want to avoid that, glue 2 layers of foam board together, but I don't really have a preference for it. I am just going to cover the back side where the hooks are with hot glue so they don't scratch the wall or me or my table. It also helps them stay sturdy and attached to the back side. They're not going to be very likely to pull out unless you really give them a yank. So I covered all of the back side with the hot glue. And now I am going to start with my trim, and I am using some feather boa. So I'm going to start on the back side and just kind of glue that down so it's nice and sturdy, just right in the corner. And then I'm going to flip the board over and I'm going to glue the feather boa all the way around the frame. Again, this project is pretty forgiving, so unless you're extremely anal about how particular you want things, then there's really not too much measuring. You're really not going to mess much up here. And I just got these feather boas at the Dollar Tree. Again, I was trying to keep this project very cost effective. So my next step is along that top line, I put a layer of buttons because these are the buttons that Tate picked out that she wanted for decoration. So I laid them out in the pattern that I wanted them, and then I just hot glued them. Another reason I did this is because this was along the frame line and you could see where I had marked it with pin. So that was very helpful. If you don't want to have to cover anything up, I suggest you use a pencil and make sure you erase all the pencil marks before you do the Mod Podge. So I got that row done, and then here I'm just showing you, you could do more decoration in each row if you wanted to. I prefer not to because it's all going to be covered up with hair ties anyways, but if you wanted to lay out, you know, more decoration in the middle, you could. Here I'm laying out some buttons, and then there is some sparkly jewels in there as well, but in this case I didn't want to add anything else because you wouldn't be able to see it anyways. So I'm just going with the top layer of buttons, and then I'm moving on. Now we're going to need some hooks to hang it with on the back side, and this is one of my favorite DIYs, using the top of the pop can tab. I'm just hot gluing the tab on the back, making sure I give myself just a little bit of room so I can put some ribbon through it. I'm gluing one on each of the top corners, and I'm just going to let that dry. Make sure you get enough glue on there if you're doing hot glue that it's going to hold. Let that dry really, really well. And then this is the ribbon I chose to use. It's white with silver hearts on it, and I'm just going to thread that through the first pop tab and tie 2 knots in that. I'm going to measure out, just eyeballing it to make sure that I have enough to hang it as long as I want to, and then I'm going to thread the other end through the other pop tab and tie that a couple times. And there it is, it's done. And this is how it looks when it's all hung up. And here I have put quite a few hair ties on it. As you can see, I've got 2.5 extra rows, which is really awesome. I did find some extra hair ties that I didn't have on the board, but all in all I think it turned out really, really well, and it's enough storage for all of her hair ties. I can see them now and I don't have to dig through the box anymore. If you guys liked this project, please give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you next time with another DIY project. Thanks guys. Be kind to each other.